We are back with another Badlands card review. Today it's Death Knight, and this one's kind of crazy. Let's talk about Reska, the Pit Boss, the first of two legendaries in this video. Reska is 20 mana. It is Unholy Frost rune combination, a 6/3 undead with Rush, and it costs 1 less for each minion that died this game. Do take note, that is not friendly minion, that's all minions. So your opponent's minions are also going to be discounting Reska. That has that kind of corridor creeper vibe of old. It's also got Death Rattle, take control of a random enemy minion. So that's got Sylvanas vibes. But of course, with Rush in particular, you can probably line up some pretty interesting ways to kill this off. That 3 health, pretty easy to work with. So will you be mind controlling some Titans with a 0 mana card? You might, yeah, much like we do with Yogg Saron, who just broke the meta, and it was just announced Yogg 2 is getting colossally nerfed, no longer having that crazy cost discount. So could this be Yogg vibes 2.0? I don't know if it's quite that strong. It doesn't have like the crazy flexibility of Yogg, but it's living in a similar space. Now, beyond that, there's another thing we really have to talk about with this card, which is the Azurite Rat. You may remember this was revealed previously as the final tier payoff for excavating treasures with the new excavate keyword. You get a 1, 2, 3 cost card first up, 1, 2, 1, then 2, then 3. Then you get this, the Azurite Rat, for your 4th excavate if you're a Death Knight, and it resurrects your highest cost minion and gives it reborn and lifesteal. And I think there's a pretty dang good chance a 20 mana minion's gonna be your highest cost minion, which means the Azurite Rat, if you've already played your Reska, is gonna resurrect this with reborn, which means of course you're just gonna wipe out your opponent's board, either stealing it or killing it or leaving behind a 6/1 with mind control. So this is an absolutely bonkers combo, and it's pretty clear that Reska here is meant as a payoff for excavate decks. We're gonna see some additional cards here to support activating your Reska. As we know, of course, Unholy as a package in general also just has a lot of small minions to throw in. So it really just becomes a question of how quickly that Reska starts to activate. And I don't think it's going to take that long to get this into a playable state, even as early as the kind of mid-game turns. Turn 5, 6, 7, we might be seeing Reskas come down. Perhaps not for 0, but at least playable, setting you up for that monster swing off the Azurite Rat, which is probably going to be like in any at least board-based matchup, it's going to be absolutely game destroying in that sort of case. And of course, if your opponent is playing a board-based deck, you're going to get all this done even faster because they're going to have minions on board as well that are dying off and making your Reska even cheaper along the way. So this has complete like crazy ramifications for altering the meta, especially for minion-based early game plans. As soon as you draw this Reska, game is on, and I bet there are probably even good ways to like tutor this card out and so on. So pretty crazy potential here on Reska in this Excavate Azurite Rat world. Speaking of which, we've got some additional support here. Pile of Bones is another Frost Unholy combination, just like Reska. A 2 mana 2/1 undead with Death Rattle. The next time you excavate, resummon this. So this is a card that just keeps coming back whenever you excavate, and of course that's an extra minion that is dying over and over again, feeding into your Reska, while also just, you know, contributing a little bit of board pressure and corpses and so on, that your opponent starts to think about a lot over multiple turns, because as we'll see, we've already had a few excavate cards revealed in neutral and Death Knight, and we're going to get even more here in this video. So there will definitely be ways to keep returning this, you know, throughout the course of a game. Getting 4 to 6 of these is going to be possible, all of which contributing to that game plan pretty nicely. Speaking of the excavate cards, we got the Skeleton Crew. This one's single Frost, 4 mana 3/3 undead, battlecry, excavate a treasure. It costs 0, and this is actually kind of nuts. You guys may want a refresher on the other treasures, the non-rat treasures, but some of these 3-drops in particular costing 0 alongside the Skeleton Crew, that's going to be a fantastic play, even if you haven't managed to get all the way up to the 3-cost treasure yet, because remember, the first excavate you play gives you a 1, the second one gives you a 2, the third one gives you a 3, the fourth one will give you that Azurite Rat. in Death Knight. But I mean, the odds of getting 2 to 3 played already by the time you play a skeleton round on 4, not that crazy. We saw some cheap excavate cards 2 cost and 3 cost already, so you could easily hit something like, you know, the Azurite Gem, which discovers a 5 cost card. It costs 0, so you'll get a 3/3 and a 5-drop on turn 4. Or maybe you'll get the Motherlode Drake with Rush, Divine Shield, and Lifesteal, and you'll be able to play that alongside your skeleton crew for some pretty big swing potential. Maybe you'll even, if you're so lucky, to get the Ogre Fist Boulder, and you'll set this minion stats to 6/7, which honestly isn't too bad either on turn 4. And then the 2-drops really aren't too bad either. So this helps you kind of recover any tempo you might have lost while excavating along the way, while still hopefully having a couple treasures in hand to make some even bigger swings, all while, of course, still advancing that game plan with Pile of Bones, because he could come back off the skeleton crew sometimes as well, and playing into your Reska and Azurite Rat stuff in a big way. So this does look like it's coming together actually pretty nicely. Now, one other card for this kind of Reska package I think we should talk about is Crop Rotation that got revealed. I love this, dude, by the way. This art's great. 3 mana, single Unholy this time. And this is the kind of card that could definitely live outside of Reska, but definitely has implications there too. This will summon you 4/1/1 undead with Rush that die at the end of turn. So this is a few things, right? This is corpse building. This is board reaction. If you need to clear something of your opponents, you can just tidy up their board a little bit. And this is a 4 mana discount on your Reska game plan as well. So this definitely does make sense as a way to start fueling into that Reska. I don't think this card's like so crazy efficient at any one of those given things that it's like a must run piece necessarily, but it might just be efficient enough at all of those different things that it just makes too much sense not to run, if that makes sense. The kind of jack of all trades effect on this one. So yeah, all in all, I mean, these cards definitely do make sense together for me, and I think a couple of them probably even make a little bit of sense beyond this package as well. Some of these, you know, are kind of parasitic excavate cards that are, of course, all going to be run together, but Crop Rotation in particular could get there. And frankly, Reska doesn't have to be in a treasure deck necessarily. You could also see some maybe double Unholy decks that just want to use Reska one time, and that makes it worth it. But altogether, there is some real kind of crazy potential here on this one, I think. All right, so moving on, we got another legendary here, Maw and Paw, or as I like to call it, Azerothian Gothic. It is a new 4 mana, Blood Unholy, 1/8 undead. A lot of stuff going on in this already. And it reads, at the end of your turn, gain 5 corpses. At the start of your turn, spend 5 corpses to give your hero +5 health. So basically, you plop down this big old 1/8, which very imbalanced stat line, but they wanted this to have some survivability, clearly. And if it lives into the start of your next turn, it's given itself enough corpses in order to give you +5 health. So we see, obviously, some extra survivability here bundled into the Unholy Blood combination. So not like a triple blood card that's going to give you even more ways to get even more crazy health totals. But if you are running Blood Unholy, like there are Plague packages right now, for instance, doing exactly that, this could be an option to give you a little bit more of that survivability, defensive utility, basically, assuming that your Maw and Paw survives the turn. Now, if it doesn't survive the turn, 8 health, there is probably a world where this still kind of heals you for 8, because the opponent probably had to, you know, attack into this, particularly aggro decks might have to send a few minions into this because they're a little bit scared of the Maw and Paw. It's kind of like that Doomsayer effect of old, where sometimes you just play the Doomsayer and like it would heal you for 7 even if it didn't go off. Thankfully, the Maw and Paw does have this, you know, additional upside that you still get to keep your extra corpses, even if the opponent does manage to kill this right away. And presumably, if you're running an Unholy deck in particular, probably have some interesting ways to spin those corpses in any given package. So that's nice. Now, I'll be honest, when I first looked at this card, my first instinct was like, I don't know, man, that's just one attack. Like, that's not even, if it does take a bunch of defensive trades, that's not going to be any good. Only +5 health. It's like, man, it's not really any good, because in control matchups, that's going to be a wash over the course of the game, right? And in aggro matchups, I feel like you might be better off just playing a removal card or something instead of Maw and Paw. This weird kind of pseudo-stall, pseudo-persistent defensive threat. Like, I don't know. Sometimes I'd rather just deal with the stuff or just heal directly. And it feels like this is a bit kind of passive and on the back foot. for those sorts of reactive game plans that are demanded. You know, the rune combination here can always be a hurdle for cards in the Death Knight package. So my first instincts on this card were pretty soft, but then I saw so many aggro players, presumably on Reddit and Twitter, because this card came out a little while ago, just absolutely molding about this card. Just like, this is so annoying. They have so much health already. I'm gonna have to deal with this 8 health thing. That started getting the gears turning. Like, if aggro players are so annoyed by this and so intimidated by this card, maybe it's better than I think. You know, I don't typically play a ton of like straight up aggro decks, so you know, my instincts on what's annoying to an aggro player might be a little bit off, and a lot of them had that instinct that this looks really annoying. So I don't know if that's just a worry or a reality. I still think there are some limitations to this that aren't exciting. I actually would almost rather this be like a 2/7 or a 3/6 or something. So it still had some degree of survivability, but ultimately was able to take some trades if stuff did hit into it, because right now I feel like maybe it's not going to soften up a board quite enough. So maybe a little softer than most, but I did enjoy a lot of people getting really upset about all the help this card offers. All right, so moving on here, we got Fistful of Corpses, 1 mana spell. It is, again, Blood and Unholy, and this one deals damage to a minion equal to your corpses, which, yeah, this actually seems pretty nice. You can get some significant corpse totals, of course, in Death Knight, and you don't need them to be super significant to make a card like this feel worth it, because we've seen, you know, in Priest, that 1 mana, you know, light it burns kind of thing, where you just have that really cheap way to swing the board effectively, deal with some of those mid-sized threats, can help you recover a board state or a turn quite nicely. And I think this will play into that really well. Just 1 mana deal 5, sometimes 1 mana deal 10 on something really big is going to feel super efficient. Still always some deck building questions with a card like this, with the, you know, the mixed runes here basically. But as we said, already with Plague DK, this kind of alignment exists, and it could slot into a deck like that already, just to give it some of that greater kind of stabilization in the mid game in particular, where you're killing stuff super efficiently while still able to play other cards that advance your own game plan, like the Plague package in particular. So yeah, I think this looks really nice and efficient. Unlike some of the pre stuff we saw yesterday, you don't have to spend 4 mana up front to get the good 1 mana removal card here, like you do, I think, in that package, which definitely made me nervous. So I like this one notably more. Now, that said, you know, you got to acknowledge that you have to have the corpses to make this feel good, but I don't think that's going to be a particular struggle for the decks that are obviously building into this. And I think, you know, 3 to 5 corpses might just be enough to make this card feel pretty good in many scenarios. So ultimately, that should be achievable by the early to mid game, you know, where this is probably the card you're most excited, the time you're most excited to play this card. All right, so next up here we have Corpse Farm, a new 3 mana single unholy spell. This one allows you to spend up to 8 corpses to summon a random minion of that cost. So hopefully you get yourself a nice big corpse buffer, and you use this to effectively get an 8 drop, hopefully cheat it out for 3. I think there would be some scenarios in the mid game where it's not quite that big, and you maybe get like a 5 or a 6. I will say the fact that you're getting a random minion here, I think does hurt this one quite a bit. There are still so many garbage rolls at any given random cost. You know, there are some high rolls, of course, too, right? But there are so many like battle cry minions that don't have bonus effects or stats or anything. They're going to feel really bad. And when this is living in a space that's similar to Corpse Bride, the 5 drop that allows you to spend up to 10 corpses and then get the fixed stat Risen Groom card. I'm just going to pull that up because I'm here. You guys will know the Corpse Bride probably, right? This does a very similar sort of thing, but it gives you a fixed value, and it can also frankly be bigger. So you're always, if you're spending 7, you're going to get a 7/7, right? Not to mention, of course, the Corpse Bride body itself. Now that is a little bit more expensive, but it's probably hitting at around the same sorts of turns. And can you do enough with that bonus 2 mana compared to Corpse Farm versus Corpse Bride that it feels like it was worth it to run Corpse Farm over Corpse Bride, right? It's also a non-rune typed card, so it has as much or more flexibility than something like the Corpse Farm as well. You can play that in non-unholy decks, although this is probably an unholy specific sort of thing to do. So ultimately, I think this is just a tough space for this card to be in, and I think a lot of the consistency is going to hurt this one. If you could reliably summon an 8-drop on turn 3, sure, the fact that this is 3 mana would be awesome, but I don't think you're going to be doing that on turn 3 often enough. It's really going to be hitting in the mid game anyway, so it starts to compete with other options that I think just offer you a little bit more consistency than this does. So for me, I think this card's just going to fall a bit short. Next up here, we have probably the best art in all of Hearthstone, maybe named too. This is Farmhand. It's so good. It's a 3-mana minion, double unholy this time around. It's a 4/3. It's undead naturally, and Battlecry, discover an undead. Quick draw, it costs 2 less. So if you draw this off the top on turn 3, you can get yourself a pretty cheap undead, hopefully, and just start swarming the board with all of these various undead. There are, of course, some cheap undead as well that would kind of help you really weave that into a given turn. Now, as we've talked about with quick draw a lot, hitting these on time is going to be tough, or if you do hit them later in the game, there might be bigger, better things that you want to do or ways to more cleanly spend your mana. So I do think the quick draw bonus here, again, is going to be pretty rare in straight up kind of minion play decks like this one, like Unholy. If you have shuffling mechanics, if you have shenanigans, quick draw probably gets better. I don't see room for that in this sort of package. So the quick draw is probably not the most exciting. I mean, honestly, a body that discovers a body that is synergistic is not necessarily a bad thing, though. You may not always need the quick draw for this to feel okay. I don't think it feels outstanding, though, without the quick draw. It just feels okay, and that might make the cut near the bottom of a list. Now, I will say, if you discover this and have its quick draw active, that could create some really cool discover chains. So a card like this existing in the pool of all things to discover, that could actually be much more interesting than actually perhaps running this in your deck. Reska the Pit Boss is a 5-star card. Pile of Bones is a 4-star card. Skeleton Crew is a 4-star card. Crop Rotation is a 3-star card. Maw and Paw is a 3-star card. Fistful of Corpses is a 4-star card. Corpse Farm is a 2-star card. Farmhand is a 3-star card. And there you go, folks. That wraps it up for this particular Showdown in the Badlands card review. What do you think of these Death Knight cards? Do you like Maw and Paw a little more than me? Are you one of those terrified aggro players, or perhaps a greedy control player looking forward to keeping this one alive for a long time? That actually sounds really fun. How many turns can we keep Maw and Paw alive and go from there? But as always, thanks so much for watching. Share your thoughts on these cards down in the comments below. And until next time, game on.